Okay, after the first video on the cooling setbacks, I got lots of people making comments, and some of the comments told me quite a bit about what you're thinking. And so I kind of want to go over, what my opinion is on this whole thing. Now, this is just for cooling setbacks. It's not for heating setbacks. We're going to talk about that a little later. But cooling setbacks, do they make sense? One way they can make sense is if there is a difference in your utility charges for different times of the day. A lot of places have higher costs for daytime use of electricity. You could save money by not turning it on until the evening, and yeah, I think that would work. It's kind of, you may be quite a while waiting for it to cool down depending on where you live, but there may be a viability there. Also, if you have a water-cooled air conditioner or geothermal heat pump using water, it really doesn't make a whole lot of difference what the outside temperature is. So let's say you let it warm up during the day, and you come home at say 5 or 6 o'clock and you turn it on, and it's going to have a higher load, but the head pressure is not going to go out of sight. That might mitigate it. Again, we start having these problems where cooling does not come down fast. Heat, it can be way different. I turn on a gas furnace and off it goes, and it's probably going to cool it down pretty quick. Well, it's going to warm it up pretty quick. But for cooling, because the equipment is of a smaller size than your heating equipment, then it's you're going to be waiting a lot longer for this to come down. Now, of course, you could set it so that you get home at 5, or get home at say 5, 6, and you turn it down at 3 or something like that. It may be at the right temperature when you get home, and it may not. In these high load areas, it could take several hours to pull down a hot room or hot structure. One of the differences between heating and cooling in this setback thing is it isn't temperature difference. Temperature difference is what is the big deal with heating. If I have a structure that's at 70 degrees and the outside temperature is at 30 degrees, okay, there's a 40-degree difference there. Okay, that's most all of what we're dealing with there. And if I turn it down to 60, then it's 30 degrees. Okay, heat does not move as fast when the temperature difference is less. That's all true for heat, but for cooling, it isn't so much. For one thing, the temperature difference isn't that great. Let's say I'm setting it at 78, and we're at 98. Well, okay, it's not quite as much. But what the big one for cooling is the sunlight coming through the windows. That makes a lot of difference in these things. You got south facing, you got west facing. There's a pretty large, in fact, it's probably the largest part of your load is the sunlight coming through the windows. So, yeah, your load could be high because of that rather than temperature difference. I think if I was in a milder temperature area, I would tend to use setbacks a little more with cooling. than if I was in a very hot, especially humid area, because there's, you want your cooling. When you get home, what's the point of having an air conditioner if it's not cool when you're in it? And if I set that thing to turn back, a couple hours early from when I come home, it still may not be down to temperature during that time. So I tend to see the cooling setbacks as not as valuable as the heating setbacks. Cooling setbacks, and I should caveat this because every area and every structure is a little different. Yeah, there's a lot of thermal load from sunlight coming through windows in cooling, and that depends on the structure. If there's shading over the windows and maybe there's not so many south or west facing windows, it's a little different. But on an overall, what I think I would do in general is, if I'm gone during the day, I'm probably not going to want to set it back. And I'm certainly not going to set it back at night. Because the last thing in the world, as I told you in the last video, was I don't want to go to bed and it gets hot. Because you say, well, it's nighttime and there's no sunlight, and so it cools down. That isn't really all that true. There's a lot of thermal load. Your attic gets hotter than heck. There's still quite a bit of load well after the sun goes down. And if you live in a desert area, I can guarantee you it's going to be hot all night long. I used to live in the high desert in California, and it's in high summer, it's hot all night long. So, setbacks in cooling, I don't think they're as valuable and would save a huge amount of money as compared to heating setbacks. I don't think they're as important. That's it on this one.